record.
There you go.
Okay, that's great, Leah. Thanks very much. Ooh, I think I've gone off presenter view. Let me just do that again. Okay, hi everybody. Welcome, as Leah said, to this last of our lunchtime sessions, I think we've been calling them. And it's on Northern Ireland's Fritillary. So it's like a little group of butterflies that I really like actually, and I really enjoy. So hopefully you will do too. As Leah said, we're just going to run through identification of the species, a little bit about butterfly conservation first, then the species ecology. We've got some nice maps to show you as well, which might help with understanding if you should see them in your area. And then we're going to talk a little bit about the UK Butterfly Monitoring Scheme, and maybe if you wanted to get involved in that. And I guess from the outset as well, I'd just like to say thank you very much to our funders. So to DAERA's Northern Ireland Environment Agency. So we've been funded by these guys for a significant number of years, so really essential to our work. Leah's part funded by them, and she's also primarily funded by the Heritage Fund and Department for Communities to do the great work that she's doing. So I'm really grateful to those funders for all that and for helping us be here today. So on with the presentation. So I just wanted to mention this really briefly, just a little bit about butterfly conservation. So I think a good number of you have been on some of the talks already, so I'll keep it brief. But basically, BC is the UK charity that looks after or is concerned about butterflies, moths, and our environment across the 4 countries. In 2021, kind of coming out of COVID, we decided that we needed a new strategy to help focus our work and deal with the biodiversity crisis that we were facing and climate change. So out of that, we identified 3 goals, so goal 1, 2, and 3. And the department that myself and Leah sit in, the Conservation Directorate, are particularly concerned with goal 2, so improving the condition of 100 of the UK's most important landscapes for butterflies and moths. But also, of course, we are doing that in the context of our threatened species. So we also have a goal about halving the number of UK's threatened butterflies and moths. In addition to that, we have a goal 3, which is really about connecting people with nature as well as citizen science. And that's all about transforming 100,000 wild spaces in the UK for people, butterflies and moths. And that's really Leah, Mai's colleagues, Rosie Irwin's remit. She looks after that space as well as volunteers and other recorders. So I just threw this up actually. Excuse me, it's a species recovery curve, and this is something you're probably going to hear more from butterfly conservation as we go through the last portion of our strategy up to 2026 and into our new one. And it's really an assessment that we're going to do on all our threatened species. So moving species through this curve, so status assessment, you know, how is the species doing? Why do we think it is where it is? What can we do to help it? And then move it through this recovery curve up towards recovery management. So this might be giving advice. It could be running workshops like we are today. So, you know, sharing information, giving advice to people about how to record. That could be over here, for example. If we feel we don't know enough about the species, we would run ID workshops. And then move it hopefully all the way through to recovery management and sustainable management. And I've got a lovely picture of Marsh Fritillaries here. And we would say really for this species, we're waiting to hear from our ecology department, but I'm pretty sure we're somewhere in this stage here from recovery management to sustainable management. So it's a species we've been looking after for a number of decades now. We know what the issue is. We know all about its life cycle and ecology. We know what we can do for it, and we've been working towards that to ensure it isn't lost and doesn't become extinct. So I'm also going to talk to you about today, so I'm just going to move the status bar down here. I'm also going to talk to you today about surveying, monitoring, and recording schemes. So like this is really, really important to us. So it's fantastic that people love to get out into nature, of course, and we know that it's all really good for our health. And counting butterflies as well. There's lots of papers actually counting butterflies and focusing on nature is really good for our health as well. It calms us down and keeps us in the moment. And I suppose it's mindful moments really. So we would encourage you in that vein to record the species that you see when you're out and about. So we have various different recording initiatives and schemes within the organization. Some of these are in partnership with other organizations as well, like the Centre for Ecology and Hydrology, and the British Trust for Ornithology, BTO. Today, I'm going to talk a little bit about the UK Butterfly Monitoring Scheme and also about just submitting casual records, okay? We're not going to talk about the Garden Butterfly Scheme today. I might mention the big butterfly count. And moths won't get hardly a mention at all today, actually, unfortunately. But we also have schemes for that. So casual moth recording, just putting out your moth trap. You could put out your moth trap in your garden once a week on a regular basis, and that moves you into the Garden Moth Recording Scheme, which is gathers more information and data, I guess, because you're doing it systematically, weekly, in the same spot in the same location, and you can get some idea of what's in your garden over the year. And also, as Leah mentioned earlier as well, she carries out some targeted priority moth species monitoring up on the north coast, as do I for some other species in other parts of the country. But we'll be focusing mostly on UK BMS and casual records today. If I can move my slides along. Oh, there we go. Hope I haven't jumped on. I don't think I have. No. Okay. So I just wanted to share this with you as well. So, and it's just really as a way of illustrating how important data is to us and how important all your records are if you monitor casually or through the UK BMS. All that information is collated and stored and ultimately ends up well, in European databases, but Butterfly Conservation also has a copy of that, and we share that out depending on where we're getting the information from. But anyway, this is a table that I've gotten from the UK Butterfly Monitoring Scheme from the website. It's an open website. You can pop in and log in. You don't need, sorry, not log in, you can visit it. You don't need a username and log in unless you're going to submit a transect. And this is basically a summary of the Northern Ireland results for 2023. And you can see all the species down here on the left-hand side that we have. When people started recording for them, the number of years that we're developing an index. So an index is really for species, we need 10 years of data so that we can look at trends, okay? And this is the 10-year trend for species. So the species we're going to be talking about today, the Fritillaries in Northern Ireland, are silver wash fritillary and dark green fritillary, which you can see here. Now, we know that we have 7 sites in Northern Ireland that are being monitored up to 2023 for silver wash fritillary and 8 for dark green fritillary. So we've also done a bit of analysis on this. So based on the distribution of the species and how many kilometre squares they occupy, we do know, for example, that we don't have enough sites monitored in relation to their distribution for silver wash fritillary. So I suppose from the outset today, what we would, we have a little plea going out, I suppose, today is for people to take up perhaps a single species transect for silver washed fritillary, but to continue your very good work for dark green fritillary and marsh fritillary. So we have just done in the past with Stephen Craig, who's our volunteer UK BMS coordinator. Myself and other colleagues have ran around the country and delivered species ID workshops and then UK BMS back to back. And in those workshops in the past, I've crazily ran through all the species you can find in Northern Ireland. And it really is a rattle, whistle, stop tour through all the species. We're not going to do that today. We're just going to look at 3 of our species that we have, the Fritillaries. So these are all considered specialists. We have wider countryside species. We have 4 species in the Republic of Ireland that we do not get in Northern Ireland, which includes a Fritillary. And I did decide actually a few days ago to include this, even though it's supposed to be just about Northern Ireland Fritillaries. I appreciate that some of you may know about the pearl-bordered Fritillary or may visit the burn where it occurs. So I just thought it would be interesting to include that. So these are all the species that we can potentially find on the island of Ireland, but we're just focusing on Fritillaries today. And here they are. So yeah, wow, lots of orange, right? And there are other orange type species that you might see flying past you when you're out in the garden or the countryside, like small copper or small tortoiseshell, but I'm not dealing with those today. They are themselves quite different and distinctive. And really the beauty about moth recording, or the necessity really, is getting your eye in and paying attention to detail, okay? And picking out characteristics. What are you seeing? So these are the 3 species I'm going to be talking about today. We have, we have the dark green fritillary here up on the top left. We have silver wash fritillary, we have the marsh fritillary, and we have the pearl-bordered fritillary that you just get in the burn. So I'm going to go through each of these separately, and it'll be interesting to see maybe in the chat or later on how many of these species you have seen. Okay, so firstly, we have the dark green fritillary. So this is a beautiful species. It's considered a large butterfly. So butterflies can be classified or put into large, medium, and small. So the dark green fritillary and silver wash fritillary are some of our largest butterflies that we can get on the island. The other two I'm going to talk about in a while, marsh fritillary and pearl bordered, are actually quite small. They're on the small spectrum. So dark green fritillary, as far as I know, we don't have any records of it yet for this year, this season, 2024 that we're in. It's just not on the wing, as we like to say yet. But this is a typical picture of it here. And that's the underside of the wing. So this would be it at rest on time there. Its flight period is mid-June to mid-August. Now, it is, I want to say, sort of widespread, but very local, okay? And it's very local in the sense that its distribution is often limited to coastal grasslands and dune systems, but it can also be found inland on heathland and grasslands. Dark green fritillary is certainly a grassland species, okay, which is different to the silver wash fritillary. I'll talk about that a bit more in a while. Now, like some of the fritillaries, both dark green and silver wash fritillary use dog violet as the food plant. And that essentially means that the female lays her eggs only on violets, which the caterpillars hatch out from the egg from and feed on. Okay, so you need this species here. And I'm sure many of you, I should have popped maybe a photograph of the food plant in, but the common dog violet is just a really low-growing little native perennial wildflower. And it's a beautiful sort of like, actually very like the bluebell. It's that blue purple color. So you can find it in a wide range of habitats, from really hedgerows and banks, dune systems to woodlands. Okay, so that's the food plant for the dark green fritillary. Now, when dark green fritillary and silver wash fritillary are on the wing, they're often on the wing. Actually, they overlap and they can cross over. And there are sites in Northern Ireland where both species can occur, but not that frequently, but frequently enough for it to be in your mind. Okay, so this is where maybe understanding its habitat and distribution will help you, right? So one really of the very distinctive identifying features, or the most probably, of dark green fritillary is this, perhaps not the best photograph actually, given that it's sitting on a green background, but it's got a silver wash on the underside of the wing, okay? And it's got this splattering of white markings across the underside of the wing, okay, which is different to the silver wash fritillary, and we can compare that a little bit in a while. It's very colourful. It's very bright. It's very yellow, sorry, not yellow, orange, with various markings on the upper side of the wing. But really, it is this that you're looking for: this green wash and this smattering of white. Okay, it's a single brooded species, meaning that it just has one generation. Okay, and just as a bit of curiosity, I guess, or interest, it overwinters as a larvae down in the leaf litter of where it's found. Okay, so in terms of its of where you'll find it, so it's found in flower-rich open habitats, or its preferred habitat, and it occurs along rich coastal sites and some inland sites, and it's less common, I would say, than silver wash fritillary. So I think this you find this really useful. Now, me and Leah, just before we came on today, actually decided that we really needed to change these distribution dots to black and not red. While red and orange are really pretty, they're perhaps too close together in the color spectrum. But if you can see, I'll just move this down here. I'm just going to move my mouse so you can see. So this is the distribution of dark green fritillary, and there's quite a collection, or quite a hot spot of the species here on the limestone grasslands of West Fermanagh. And if we move over to the east as well, it's also down in the Mournes and the Mourne Mountains here, south down coastland, and up to down in the Belfast Hills, and very much along the north coast of the North Coast, as it's called, with very few records really inland. Probably the inland records are the Belfast Hills. However, I would like to suggest that perhaps East Fermanagh, for example, Slieve Bay area, is perhaps under-recorded. and perhaps it's been seen and people think it's silverwash fritillary. So if you are out and about and you see something, what you think is dark green fritillary, you just need to keep this map in your mind, right? That the fact that it loves open, flower-rich grassland habitats, which sand dunes are very typical of, but also limestone grassland. Okay, so I think that's quite helpful. So moving on to this sort of the other maybe the confusing species for it as well is silverwash fritillary. Now it has a very similar flight period, so they are really high summer species. Again, like dark green fritillary, silverwash fritillary is not yet on the wing. And this is a male of the species here, and I'll explain why in a minute, why I know that. And you can see the underside of the silverwash fritillary here, so very different, right, to the dark green fritillary. Here, quite like its name suggests, silver washed, we have this wash of silver down the underside of the wing, okay? A little bit of green as well, but different to the dark green. It doesn't have that patternation of white, okay? Now, I appreciate that as they're flying past you as they can on a hot day, it really isn't very easy to distinguish one from the other. However, particularly the silverwash fritillary does come to rest quite readily. It likes to feed, particularly on bramble flowers. This seems to be on common knapweed here. But anyway, just running through the different headings here. It is widespread but localized, okay? So widespread as in it can be found across all of Northern Ireland, but in local areas. And actually, we have found, excuse me, in recent years, records for the species really jumping up significantly. Now, this could be that it's expanding its range and or also that people are just out looking for it more, just out and about looking more, really, and more engaged with recording. So I think there's a combination of issues going on here, or factors, which are both very positive. Silverwash fritillary is considered a woodland species, okay? So it's not a species you typically find, or you find in open grassland. It's certainly definitely found in woodlands. However, it does come out of woodlands and it loves to feed on sunny rides. So I know, for example, the county I live in, Fermanagh, we have lots of really nice pockets of woodland, and where there's a nice track or edge running along the side of a deciduous woodland, which is open to the sun, with bramble, which sounds very specific, but actually it is something you'd see across the country. You will often see, particularly the males, patrolling it, very vigorous, strong flight, feeding on bramble. So it is a woodland species. And we know that really actually because, interestingly, it has a fascinating sort of ecology. The females are on the wing from June to August. And after they've mated, the females actually lay her eggs on the bark of trees, which I find fascinating. It's not actually on the food plant, about 1 meter or 2 up from the ground. So I think I've put a little bit in about it here, or maybe I didn't. So larvae in tree trunks. The larvae hatch out a couple of weeks after they've been laid, and very quickly, actually, they just go into hibernation and they don't come out again until the spring. And when they do, they make their way down the tree trunk looking for dog violet. So very cleverly, the female lays her eggs in tree trunks close to where there are patches of dog violet. Okay, so it's a lovely, fascinating species. While they may appear, in lots of the textbooks similar in size, typically silverwash fritillary is much larger, and it is considered the largest of our fritillaries. So very, very distinctive. This is the male here, and these are actually scent scales, or sex brands as they're called, or scent scales, and they're on the forewings of just the male, and their function really is to release pheromones to attract the female. So if you see this, then you really do know that it is a silverwash fritillary. Dark green don't have these scent glands, and then really, if you want a confirmation of that, what you're looking for is the underside of the wing with this silver wash. Okay, so a wonderful, beautiful species, so worth looking at and looking for. And actually, you can spend quite happily a picnic in front of a stretch of area where it likes to hang out and just watch it glide around in good numbers, actually. So definitely worth looking out for. I'll just move my slide. It'll go forward for me. So this is a map actually that Leah's produced through our project. And again, we've got the the distribution of the species with the red dot. So we can see actually it's much more widespread than dark green Fritillary, okay? Perhaps under-recorded in some areas, but it's here up around the Glens of Antrim, where again you get lots of lovely woodland, in South Down, but there's records here in South Armagh, in that part of Armagh, and widespread right across all of Fermanagh. So depending where you find yourself, if you are really in a woodland, on a woodland edge, with no maybe significant grassland around, and you see this species flying, it's highly likely it's silver-wash Fritillary. However, I would encourage you to confirm that ID if you get the opportunity, because silver-washed, as I said, are quite easy to observe. They do they nectar a lot, so you can sort of sneak up on them, take a photograph, and see what they are. But you can see that there are other records here around Tyrone and Fermanagh as well, so, and Derry actually, and County Down. So definitely species to look out for, definitely more widespread and not confined to coastal grassland sites like dark green Fritillary or the outer edges of the country. And then on to a species, I would say that I know a fair bit about actually marsh Fritillary. It's a beautiful species. It's on the wing at the moment. If you follow our Facebook page, there's lots of excited photographs and people posting pictures of it. I'm really pleased to be seeing it at public sites around the country, particularly coastal dunes. It is on the wing from mid-May right through to early July, but really its peak flight period is coming up very soon. It's sort of early to mid-June. It's a widespread species. Again, this term really means that it can be found across the whole of Northern Ireland, but it is scarce and it's also very local. I should say from the outset that it is very much a European protected priority species and a UK priority species, and are one of our most protected invertebrates in Europe and across the UK. If you are going to want to monitor or survey it, then you absolutely need a license from NIEA. You can get in touch with Butterfly Conservation, and maybe we can help you with that, with giving you some maybe in-field training in September when we're monitoring. But other than that, you get your license from NIEA. Marsh Fritillary is and can be a feature of designated sites, but also can be a feature and found on sites that are not designated, that are priority habitats. So definitely, if you have you know, a nice meadow in your farm, if you're lucky enough to have a farm, or if you are out walking in the countryside on a site where you don't think is designated and you find Marsh Fritillary, then do get in touch with us with Butterfly Conservation, and with the landowner's permission, excuse me, we could go out and see if we can ideally find the larval webs and maybe get this put into an EFS, the Agri-Environment Scheme. So just a little bit about the species then. So like I was saying, it is on the wing from mid-May to early July. And the habitat where it's found, really, the habitats are very diverse actually. And it all comes back to the food plant, which is Devil's Spit scabious succisa pratensis. So again, Marsh Fritillary is a specialist butterfly, and the female only lays her eggs on Devil's Spit scabious. But that food plant happily can be found across a wide variety of habitats. And this is what is proving to, I suppose, make it resilient against climate change, but also habitat loss and land use change. So a lot of the sites I survey for in September through with NIEA, there's a whole host. There's acid grassland, purple moor grassland, rush pasture. There's sand dunes, calcareous grassland. So it's found in all of these habitats, and also on bogs where there's like mosaica habitats. It's single brooded again, so it just has one generation each year, and it overwinters as a larvae. And actually, what we're really interested in when we are trying to find more sites and protect them is, you know, not necessarily just where the butterfly, where you see the adult, but where it's breeding. So when we go out and look for larval webs, because the larvae are communal and they create these larval webs throughout their, I suppose, their hibernation period, and when they're actively feeding in the spring and the early winter. So again, it's a fully protected species. It can be a feature of designated sites, and it is actually, as well, importantly, provided for in Northern Ireland's Agri-Environment Scheme, which is currently EFS. So these are just a couple of maps I wanted to share with you actually. So I've got a mosquito flying around me. So this is sort of like a little bit of an older map that we've been using with EFS. We probably need to update it because there are some new records from this area of the country. But essentially, we produce this, and this is used by DERA and NIEA, and particularly for the Agri-Environment Scheme, for their, I suppose, the species-specific advisory for farmers. And what we've included here are these buffer zones. So basically, this dot in the middle is a marsh fritillary known breeding site. And given that the species is mobile and that it can, in good years, move out into other suitable habitat to breed, we have included these buffer zones. So if farmers, for example, have suitable habitat like purple moor grassland rush pasture with Succisa in it, then we feel that they could be eligible to go into EFS scheme based on their proximity to this known breeding site. So this is very, very useful. And this is also another map that was created by one of our ecologists within Butterfly Conservation. We produced a UK marsh fritillary dossier in 2019, but it's more like 2020, 21 perhaps. But it just gives the status of colonies across and populations across the UK. So we can see here that some of these red dots haven't been revisited in a while, but this might have been rectified since. But we can see again, it sort of is a good reflection of what's going on here, except this is a new population that was found a number of years ago. So we have lots of data, lots of interest, and lots of action for marsh fritillary, but we definitely can't afford to be complacent. We need to keep up the very good work that's been delivered over the years for that species. So finally, I'm just going to talk very briefly about pearl-bordered fritillary. And this is a species that we do not get in Northern Ireland. So I'm now diverging from the title of the talk, Northern Ireland Fritillaries. So it's actually on the wing at the moment as well, and it's found only in the burn on the island of Ireland, but it is found in the other countries in the UK. Its flight period is May to June. Like I said, it's confined to the burn on the island of Ireland, and its habitat actually is woodlands. However, it likes quite open, warm woodlands. It likes warm conditions where the food plant occurs, and again, this is dog violet. It's single brooded, and it overwinters as a larvae. And it's considered a small species. And this, I suppose, the identifying feature from this, if you saw this flying, firstly, would be the size that would differentiate it from silver wash fritillary or dark green fritillary, both of which you will get in the burn. But actually, what does stand out is that it's got quite an open patternation, as I was saying here, open pattern of marks and rounded spots on the upper side. So it's not as densely marked as silver wash fritillary or dark green fritillary. And then it gets its name proper pearl-bordered fritillary from these small white, not particularly small, but and they're not particularly pearl-shaped, but maybe pearl in color, these markings on the underside of the wing, and there's 7 in total. So that's what really marks out pearl-bordered fritillary from the other two. So again, this open patternation on the upper side, and then these white markings on the underside of the wing, okay? And if you're in the burn at this time of the year, maybe once dark green and silver wash come on the wing, then that's what you'd be looking for, okay? So beautiful species, and it is small as well. So I think in this instance, while we would say with some species, size doesn't matter, probably in this instance, because they've jumped the medium size, we're looking at large or small with this. So I think we could use that as a way to separate it out. I just wanted to share a map as well. So BC must have, this is an old map actually, and I think we are going to be updating our fact sheets at some stage. And I assume that this map is looking at the UK. So Northern Ireland is showing here that it doesn't have pearl-bordered fritillary, but perhaps what we could have done was added in pearl-bordered fritillary. So this is where it does occur, and I've done that. I've gone into our friends and partners, the National Biodiversity Data Centre, their website, and you can see that they're showing the pearl-bordered fritillaries distribution here on the island of Ireland. And there's this little population that I think would be in Mayo. So again, I guess maybe if you wanted to check yourself, if you don't look at the text box at the bottom, see if you can remember which is which, if you can remember the sort of characteristics I gave you. But what we have here is dark green fritillary and silver wash fritillary, marsh fritillary, very distinctive actually, and it's got this sort of what we call stained glass effect. And you've got maybe not the best photograph, but of pearl bordered Fritillaries. So very quickly, because I can see I'm sort of running out of time a little bit, but what makes a record? Well, I suppose in the past we would have said name, date, location, species, and abundance, which is how many you saw. And we would still say that, but I guess maybe even saying this means that you're using a notebook perhaps. And oftentimes actually I still do use a notebook. And when I come home, I would sometimes go on to CEDAR, Centre for Environmental Data and Recording, which is the Northern Ireland Biological Records Centre, or also they would also signpost iRecord, as does Butterfly Conservation, particularly for casual records. So you can use your phone for that when you're out in the field and you see it, and it'll pin your location, which is really handy, or you can use it as a desktop app. So we really recommend and support that. And I'm going to briefly just go into a little bit, because I did mention about asking people to take up a single species transect for particularly silver wash Fritillary. That is really, we do feel we need more data on it, more understanding of how it's doing in terms of its phenology. But the UK Butterfly Monitoring Scheme, I didn't include the logos, but it's a partnership of CEH, JNCC, BTO and Butterfly Conservation. And this is just a quick map. It's probably slightly dated now, but it's a map of the transects found across the UK. You can see here in Northern Ireland, I suppose it's represented, well, actually, this is the transects, UK BMS transects, and this is butterflies of the new millennium. So these are sort of a combination of that, but plus casual records as well, so iRecord. So you can see here actually the east of Northern Ireland is very well recorded, supported by I guess the population and the level of interest and all the people that live there. So it's fantastic. So we do, for a long time, have quite a gap sort of in getting people recording or taking on transects for really Tyrone and Derry, Londonderry, and maybe parts of Armagh as well. So particularly if you're in those areas, we'd love to hear from you. The UK BMS has its very own website. There is tons of information on it. As I was saying, it's sort of a website that you can log on to and visit. There's a section about getting involved, getting recording, and there's loads of guidance there. However, just in case I forget to say it at the end, myself and Leah, Rosie, when she comes back from maternity leave, and also Stephen Craig, who is our UK BMS volunteer coordinator, we're all here to help with you or help you if you want to walk a transect. So there's field guidance notes, for example, if you want to set up a transect, if you have a nice woodland, excuse me, where you think you have silver wash Fritillary, simply all you need to do really is design or identify a safe route through the woodland with the landowner's permission. And you'd set up different sections along the way, and you record what you'd see walking at a steady pace and meeting various parameters. Okay, and the parameters really are all about the weather, which is why me and Leah were obsessing maybe at the beginning of the call today about the weather. How's it doing? How windy, how sunny is it, for example? So to walk a butterfly transect, we need you to meet a couple of conditions, which would be, needs to be a minimum of 13 degrees and sunny, or if it's not sunny, 16 to 17 degrees. And we also ask you to walk a transect between 10 a.m. and half 4 really being the latest, because generally around lunchtime is the peak time when butterflies are active. So that's when you really want to walk. And we also ask you that you walk in a particular way. Now, if you are going to do this, we would definitely talk you through it. This is a very speedy introduction, but essentially this method was just devised by Ernie Pollard. And we would ask you to walk a Pollard box, so walking at a steady pace, recording in a 5 meter sort of box. So 5 meters ahead and up, and maybe 2.5 meters on either side. You don't record species that fly behind you. Happily, there's lots of guidance again on UK BMS, and also there is a weekly transect recording form that you can use as well that will help you record as you go along. But again, that is a real fly through about setting up a transect. I think that's just a dip in. What I'd encourage you to do is go onto the website, read the guidance, have a think about it. You could try a transect this year, and if you like it, then you could definitely walk it going into the future. And again, I guess UK BMS transects, we do like to think of them as at least a medium term commitment, you know, so it's not just for 1 year or 2 years, it's really for 5, 10, 15, 20, 30 years, okay? If you feel that commitment is too much for you, your casual records are super, super valuable as well. Okay, so I suppose lastly, the last thing to say is thank you for listening. Please submit your data to iRecord. All data is super useful, really valuable, with lots of very clever and skilled people within BC, statisticians who spend their time poring over data and doing clever analysis. So, and that is reported back every year, available to everybody to see through UKBMS, for example. If you want to have a go at recording as well, getting involved in another, our major Big Butterfly Count initiative, actually, it's running this year from the 12th of July to Saturday, the 4th of August. There's a lovely app you can download onto your phone. And essentially, you just spend 15 minutes in a sunny spot anywhere, in your garden, in a park, walking down the road, and you record the butterflies you see. So really nice snapshot of what's to be found in your local area. We run events across the year. We have a branch as well, full of very dedicated, passionate recorders and volunteers. So you can check out what they do, as well as Leah, myself, and Rosie throughout the year. You could become a member of BC. So obviously we're like all the other ENGOs. We're always looking for new members, and your membership money is very valuable to us. So if you're interested in that, check that out. We've launched a new portal for our volunteers. I won't again talk about that today. If you do end up volunteering from us, you'll get to know more about this. And then as well, you can find us on social media. So we have a very active Facebook group, and we've also a very active Facebook page. So we post on our page for like events and training, like these sessions in our group. People put up their observations and postings of butterflies. So really useful to follow and see what's flying for butterflies and for moths. And then I mentioned Stephen a couple of times as well. So if after looking at the UKBMS website and you're interested in Walking Transect, get in touch with myself or Stephen. I'll probably give you a bit of info and I'll signpost you to Stephen, okay? And that's it, I think. I think all I want to say really is I hope we have a great summer, fingers crossed, that the sun does come out, but it does come out. I want to thank Leah very much for helping to host these sessions the last 4 events, and also to our funders. Thanks, Leah.
Thanks, Rose. I'm just going to stop the recording.